So when we take the square root of something that's even, or when we take the fourth root of an even number, if the inside is positive, if we take it to both sides, we get a plus or minus. But when we do a negative, it actually has no real solution. It is a complex solution. It's I. Okay, so it's a complex number. But when the root is odd, you can have a positive or a negative number. When you take the square root of both sides, it's going to be 3 or negative 3. Okay, so it does have a real number. So that's what you need to keep in mind when we are solving equations. So in example 5, we're going to solve the equation 6x cubed equals negative 1296. So we're going to solve it the same thing like we normally do. We're going to isolate the x. So that means we're going to divide both sides by 6. So we get x cubed is negative 2/16. So normally if this was squared, we would take the square root of both sides. But because it's cubed, we're going to take the cube root of both sides. So notice we're taking the cube root of both sides. The cube root of x cubed is just x. And the cube root of negative 2/16, so notice it's negative, but I can still evaluate it. Basically, I need 3 numbers that are exactly the same, that when I multiply them, that gives me 2/16. And that's going to be negative 6. So the cube root of negative 2/16 is negative 6. Okay, for B, once again, we're going to isolate the x. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So we're going to get x to the fourth equals 81. So now we're going to take the fourth root, because I have a fourth root. So I'm going to take the fourth root of both sides. So the fourth root of x is x, and the fourth root of 81 is 4 numbers multiplied together that gives you 81, and that's going to be 3. Now, because go back here. All right, because I took an even root, okay, because it's even, we're going to get a plus or minus. So when you take the root of both sides, that's something that's even, you always have to have a plus or a minus. For example 6a, we're going to isolate the x. So first thing we're going to do is subtract 20 from both sides. And then we're going to divide by negative 2. So we end up with x cubed equals negative 8. So then we're going to take the cube root of both sides. So the cube root of x cubed is just x. And the cube root of negative 8, I need 3 numbers multiplied together, that gives me negative 8. And that's going to be negative 2. Because it's odd, we only have one answer. We don't have that plus or minus. Only on evens do we have the plus or minus. So let's look at B. We're going to isolate the x. So we're going to add 1. Then we're going to divide by 2. So we end up with x to the fourth equals negative 81. So when we take the fourth root on both sides, notice that I end up with a negative and it's even. So that means that this is a complex number. So this one has no real solution because it's a negative inside of even root. So that concludes our lesson for 7.2. If you have any questions, you can email me and I will answer them.